The grandfather clock in the hall chimes 4. Its voice a hollow bronze gong that counts out the beats of my silence. Its polished mahogany case holds a universe of reflections. The dim floral pattern of the wallpaper, the ghostly outline of the armchair where my husband, Robert, used to sit, and my own face, a pale oval floating in the wood's dark grain. This house is a museum of a life I once lived, each object a carefully curated artifact. The silver frames on the mantelpiece hold the frozen smiles of my son, Mark, from gap-toothed elementary school portraits to the self-assured grin on his Wharton graduation day. My days are a ritual of dusting these memories, of polishing the silver until it gleams with a light that feels borrowed from the past. The air itself is thick with the scent of lemon oil and yesterday. My world has shrunk to the dimensions of this house and the small, manicured lawn that separates it from the quiet street. Our town, with its colonial-era town square and ancient, spreading oaks, prides itself on being unchanging. A place where history is not just remembered but actively preserved. For years, I found comfort in that permanence, in the predictable rhythm of the seasons painting the maple trees outside my window in shades of green, then fire, then barren gray. Now, the predictability feels like a cage, each identical sunrise a reminder of the stasis that has become my existence. The silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's heavy, a woolen blanket I can't throw off. Every morning, I walk the perimeter of the house, checking the rose bushes Robert planted, their thorns like tiny barbs of memory. I run a hand along the sturdy brickwork, the foundation of this life I helped build. A life I thought was as solid as the stone beneath my feet. I brew a single cup of tea, the clink of the spoon against the porcelain the loudest sound in the kitchen. I sit at the table, a table built for 4, and I watch the dust motes dance in the slanted afternoon light, each one a tiny, forgotten particle, visible for a moment before vanishing back into the shadows. This afternoon, a different sound breaks the quiet, the gentle snip-snip of shears from next door. Mr. Henderson is tending to his prize-winning hydrangeas. He's a widower, a man whose quiet kindness is as reliable as the sunrise. He sees me through the window and offers a small, crinkle-eyed smile. A few minutes later, he's at my back door, holding a small bouquet of deep blue blossoms. "Thought these might brighten the place up, Eleanor," he says, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "They're beautiful, Arthur. Come in. Let me get you some iced tea." We sit at the kitchen table, the vibrant blue of the flowers a startling splash of life against the muted tones of the room. He never pries, but he listens. He knows about Mark's success, his beautiful wife, Susan, their perfect children in their perfect suburban life 3 states away. He asks, as he always does, "Heard from the boy?" And I give my usual answer, a practiced, bright lie. "Oh, you know Mark, always so busy with work. He's closing a big deal." Arthur just nods, sipping his tea, his silence more comforting than any platitude. He understands the shape of loneliness. His simple question hangs in the air long after he's gone, and it pulls me back, down a long, dark hallway of memory. I'm not in my quiet kitchen anymore. I'm in a sterile, glass-walled office that smells of carpet cleaner and ambition. Mark is across the table, 28 years old and vibrating with a desperate energy. His hair is perfectly combed, but there's a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He's talking fast, sketching out the architecture of his future on a napkin, a tech startup, a revolutionary app, a chance to get in on the ground floor. He just needs the capital. The banker, a man with a tired suit and even more tired eyes, keeps looking from Mark's frantic scribbles to me. "It's a substantial loan, Mrs. Gable," the banker had said, his voice flat. "The bank would require significant collateral." Mark's eyes found mine, shining with the same desperate hope he had as a boy when he wanted a new bicycle for Christmas. "Mom, it's the house," he'd whispered, leaning across the table. "It's paid off. It's perfect. It's just for a few years until the company takes off. I swear, I will always take care of you. This house will always be your home." I remember the feeling of the pen in my hand, how cold and heavy it felt. Robert had worked 2 jobs for 20 years to pay off this mortgage. It was our fortress, our legacy. But looking at my son, my only child, his entire future balanced on the point of my pen. What choice did I have? I saw the life I wanted for him, the success he craved. The love for a child is a blinding thing. It makes you deaf to the small, screaming voice of self-preservation. My hand trembled as I signed the papers, leveraging my entire past for his future. The memory dissolves, leaving the bitter taste of old coffee in my mouth. The phone on the wall is silent. It has been for 3 weeks. I think of my last conversation with Mark. It was clipped, efficient. He needed the name of the accountant Robert used to use. Not, "How are you, Mom?" Not, "Is there anything you need?" Just a request for information. He was a man retrieving a file from a cabinet. The warmth of his promise in that cold bank office has been replaced by the chilling draft of his indifference. A cold that has settled deep in my bones. The light bulb in the pantry had been flickering for a week, a minor annoyance I kept meaning to address. On Tuesday, I decided was the day. I pulled the small wooden stepladder from the broom closet. Its familiar creak under my weight, a sound as old as my son's college-era posters still tacked to the back of his bedroom door. I was careful, planting my feet firmly on the second step, reaching up to unscrew the spent bulb. The world was a small, focused circle. The cool glass in my hand, the dusty fixture above, the faint smell of dried spices on the shelves. And then, a shift. A subtle wobble in the ladder's leg that I had never noticed before. My body, no longer as forgiving as it once was, didn't have time to correct. There was a moment of pure, weightless suspension. A gasp of disbelief as the floor rushed up to meet me. The impact was not a singular event, but a series of explosions. A sickening crack echoed in the small space as my hips struck the unforgiving linoleum. A burst of white-hot light behind my eyes, followed by a pain so vast and profound it seemed to have its own geography. It was a continent of agony, and I was its sole, unwilling inhabitant. The pantry, once a place of order and domesticity, became a hostile landscape. The sharp corner of a shelf dug into my back. The air was thick with the coppery smell of my own fear, and the ticking of the kitchen clock became a monstrous, percussive count of my helplessness. Minutes bled into an hour. The initial shock gave way to the horrifying clarity of my situation. My right leg was twisted at an angle that defied nature, and any attempt to move, to even shift my weight, sent fresh waves of nausea and black-throated pain through me. The phone. It was on its cradle on the kitchen wall, a lifetime away. I began to crawl. It wasn't a crawl, really, but a desperate, pathetic drag. I used my elbows and my one good leg, my cheeks scraping against the floor tiles, leaving a trail of tears and sweat. Each inch was a victory paid for in torment. The world narrowed to the pattern on the floor. The dust bunnies huddled like frightened animals under the cabinets, the immense, yawning distance to the wall. Finally, my fingers brushed against the cool plastic of the phone cord. With a guttural sob of effort, I pulled it down, the receiver clattering to the floor beside my head. My hands were trembling violently, my fingers slick with sweat. I fumbled with the buttons, my vision blurring, stabbing at the numbers for Mark's speed dial. The ringing started, a shrill, hopeful sound in the suffocating silence. 1 ring. 2. Please, Mark, please pick up. 3 rings. 4. Then the click. And his voice, not his real voice, but the smooth, professional recording. You've reached Mark Gable. I can't take your call right now, but please leave a message and I'll get back to you at my earliest convenience. My earliest convenience. The words were a slap. I tried to speak, to scream, but all that came out was a broken, gasping whisper. Mark, I fell. I'm hurt. The pantry. Please. The phone slipped from my grasp, and the silence returned, heavier and more absolute than before. The light in the kitchen began to fade, the cheerful afternoon sun turning to the long, gloomy shadows of dusk. I lay there, adrift in a sea of pain, the hope draining out of me with the fading light. I was beginning to believe I would die right there on my own kitchen floor. Then, I heard a sound that didn't belong to the house's usual groans and sighs. A key turning in the back door lock. The door swung open, and Arthur Henderson's kind, worried face appeared in the doorway. He was holding a casserole dish. Eleanor? I brought some of my shepherd's pie, thought you might. Oh my God! He dropped the dish, the sound of shattering ceramic a punctuation mark to the end of my ordeal, and the beginning of a new one. The help I so desperately needed had arrived, but it wasn't the help I had sacrificed everything for. It was the help of a neighbor, a near stranger, a man who owed me nothing, and in his shocked and compassionate eyes, I saw the stark, undeniable truth of my abandonment. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and the hushed, efficient murmur of voices that didn't belong to me. Arthur stayed, a quiet, solid presence in the chaos, answering questions from nurses when my own voice failed. He called Mark's number from his phone, leaving a calm, clear message detailing the fall, the broken hip, the name of the hospital. Then we waited. Hours passed. My leg, now encased in a cast, throbbed with a dull, persistent beat. Finally, my phone, which Arthur had retrieved from my purse, buzzed on the bedside table. It wasn't a call. It was a text message. And it wasn't from Mark. It was from his wife, Susan. Eleanor. So terribly sorry to hear about your fall. Awful news. Mark is absolutely swamped with this new acquisition. Just impossible for him to get away. He sends his love and will try to check in next week. Get well soon. I read the message twice, then a third time the cheerful exclamation points like tiny, mocking daggers. His earliest convenience. Next week. The flimsy excuse, the delegated sentiment, the utter lack of urgency. It wasn't a message of concern. It was a dismissal. A corporate memo about an inconvenient maternal incident. The shock was a physical blow, a cold fist clenching in my chest. Arthur saw the look on my face, the phone falling from my hand onto the thin hospital blanket. He didn't ask what it said. He simply reached over and placed his warm, dry hand over mine. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, his quiet, unassuming support was a lifeline. Its simple reality a stark contrast to the hollow absence of my son. The weeks that followed were a slow crawl through a gray landscape of pain and physical therapy. From the hospital, I was moved to a rehabilitation facility, a place filled with the quiet desperation of the frail and the broken. I learned to navigate the world with a walker, each step a carefully negotiated truce with my own body. The days were long and monotonous, marked only by the arrival of meal trays and the cheerful tyranny of the therapists. Arthur visited every single day. He brought me books from the library, crossword puzzles from the paper, and news from the outside world. He'd sit with me, sometimes talking about his garden, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence as I stared out the window. It was in those conversations that I began to cautiously unpack the contents of my heart, verbalizing the betrayal that had, until then, been a silent, festering wound. One afternoon, watching a young orderly help an elderly woman, a memory, sharp and vivid, broke through the fog. I was back in our old backyard, the air smelling of cut grass and summer sun. Mark was 5, all knobby knees and fierce determination, wobbling on a brand new bicycle with training wheels. He fell, a clumsy tumble onto the soft lawn, and immediately burst into tears, his knee scraped and bleeding. I was there in an instant, scooping him up, my arms a fortress against the world's small hurts. I cleaned the scrape, bandaged it with a gentle touch, and kissed his tear-streaked face. He looked up at me, his brown eyes wide with absolute, unwavering trust. "You always make it better, Mommy," he'd whispered, his small arms wrapped tightly around my neck. The memory was so pure, so filled with a love I had believed to be unbreakable, that its beauty was now an exquisite form of torture. That little boy who believed I could fix anything had grown into a man who wouldn't even answer the phone when I was broken. The memory of that perfect summer day unlocked another, darker one. It was as if my mind, now forced into stillness, was finally auditing the long ledger of my life. This new memory was from years later. Mark was home from his first year at college, full of new ideas and a casual disdain for his small-town origins. He had borrowed my car to go to a party and had come home long after midnight with a crumpled fender and a story about a slick road and a deer. He was sorry, he'd said, but his apology was laced with an impatient frustration. It was all about the inconvenience to him. How would he get to his summer job? How could he see his friends? There was a fleeting moment of concern for my distress, but it was quickly eclipsed by his own self-interest. I remembered soothing him, telling him it was just a car, that the important thing was that he was safe. I had papered over the incident, excused his selfishness as youthful carelessness. Now, seeing it with new, unclouded eyes, I recognized it for what it was. A warning sign. A small, subtle tremor before the earthquake. The blueprint for the man he would become had been there all along, but I had been too blinded by love to read it. Lying in my bed at the rehab center one night, the antiseptic quiet humming around me, the pieces clicked into place. The heroic sacrifice I made at the bank. The innocent trust of the little boy with the scraped knee. The casual selfishness of the young man with the wrecked car. And finally, the cold, dismissive text message from a daughter-in-law I barely knew. It was a devastating collage, and its meaning was inescapable. My relationship with my son wasn't a relationship at all. It was a transaction, and I was the only one who had ever paid. The deep, aching sorrow I had felt began to change, to cool and harden into something else. It was not anger, not yet. It was a quiet, chilling clarity. A resolution began to form in the deepest part of my soul. A decision born not of spite, but of a sudden, fierce, and long overdue sense of self. The debt was paid. The account was closed. Back in my own home, the silence felt different. It was no longer the heavy silence of loneliness, but the clean, empty silence of a blank page. The house, once a shrine to my son, now felt like a mausoleum. I moved through the rooms with my walker, my steps slow but steady, and I saw everything with the cold clarity I'd found in the long, quiet nights of my recovery. My life's purpose, I realized, had been to build this monument for Mark, a monument he had no intention of ever truly honoring. A new idea began to take root, not a bitter weed of revenge, but a hardy perennial of purpose. It was the idea of a different kind of legacy. I invited Arthur over for tea. As I laid out the cups and saucers, my hands were steady. I've made a decision, I told him, my voice even. I talked about the local community arts center, a place Robert and I used to support. A place that struggled to keep its doors open but provided music lessons and art classes to children who would otherwise have none. My legacy isn't this house, Arthur, I said, gesturing around the room filled with polished memories. It's not in the assets I can pass down. My real legacy should be in the good I can do now. I watched his face for judgment, for doubt, but all I saw was a deep, quiet respect. I think that's a wonderful idea, Eleanor, he said. A truly wonderful idea. He didn't question me. He simply offered his help in any way I needed it. The execution of my plan was surprisingly simple, a series of phone calls and meetings that felt more liberating with each one I completed. I didn't need a lawyer to tell me what to do with my own life. I met with a financial advisor, a pleasant young woman who listened patiently to my story and then laid out the steps. Then came the most important meeting. I went to the community center, my walker clicking softly on the worn wooden floors. From a classroom down the hall, I could hear the hesitant, screechy notes of a child learning the violin. I met with the center's director, a woman with tired eyes and a passionate spirit, and I told her my plan. When I named the amount I intended to donate, the full proceeds from the sale of my house and the liquidation of my savings, her eyes filled with tears. A week later, I signed the official paperwork with the real estate agent, the for sale sign, a bold declaration of my independence planted in the front yard. A few days after that, at the community center, I signed the final donation agreement. The director held my hand, her grip firm and grateful. "You are changing hundreds of lives, Mrs. Gable," she said, her voice thick with emotion. As I signed my name, the sound of that young violinist down the hall swelled into a moment of confident, beautiful music. In that sound, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I wasn't losing a home. I was building a future. I wasn't giving up my son's inheritance. I was reclaiming my own soul. Took less than a month for him to appear. The for sale sign was all it took to summon him. His sleek, expensive car pulled into the driveway, a jarring note of modern aggression against the quiet backdrop of the neighborhood. He stormed through the back door without knocking, his face a carefully constructed mask of concern. Mom? What in God's name is going on? I saw the sign. Are you all right? Has your memory been affected by the fall? Did someone talk you into this? The questions tumbled out, each one a veiled accusation, each one dripping with a frantic self-interest that was as transparent as glass. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about the deed. I'm perfectly fine, Mark, I said, my voice calm. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea before me. I didn't get up. His eyes darted around the room, as if looking for some hidden interloper, some villain who had taken advantage of his poor, confused mother. But the house. This is our house. All our memories are here. What were you thinking? The hour was a lie, and we both knew it. He hadn't spent a Christmas here in 5 years. Memories are in here, I said, tapping my temple lightly. The rest is just bricks and mortar. The mask of concern finally slipped, revealing the raw, ugly panic beneath. And the money, Mom? What about the money from the sale? My inheritance? You know how much I've counted on that for the kids' college, for our future. There it was. His future. Not my present, not my well-being, but the financial future he had already spent in his head. My internal monologue was sharp and clear. I was no longer looking at my son. I was looking at a stranger obsessed with assets. I saw every word for the manipulation it was. The feigned concern, the appeal to sentiment, the naked greed. Across the street, I could see Arthur in his garden, a silent, distant witness to this final, pathetic scene. It was a strange sort of validation. I have made arrangements for my legacy, Mark, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Everything has been taken care of. I let the ambiguity hang in the air. Let him believe what he wanted to believe. He saw it as a promise. I knew it was a final decree. He left in a fury of slammed doors and squealing tires. A petulant child denied his prize. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. It had gone cold, but I didn't mind. A year later, the world is a different place because I am a different person. I live in a small, bright apartment overlooking the town park. It's a fraction of the size of the old house, but it feels infinitely larger, filled not with the ghosts of the past, but with the light of the present. This afternoon, I am sitting in the front row of the recital hall at the newly renamed Gable Community Arts Center. Arthur is beside me, his program tapping quietly against his knee in time with the music. On stage, a young girl, the daughter of a single mother who works at the local diner, is playing a cello concerto. Her performance is breathtaking, full of passion and a talent that, a year ago, might never have found its voice. The sound fills the room, a testament to what can be built when you clear away the rubble of a life that no longer serves you. When the final note fades, the applause is thunderous. I see the girl's mother in the wings, her face shining with tears of pride, and I feel a joy so profound it is almost painful. I am laughing, a real, unburdened laugh that comes from deep within. Later, sitting on my new balcony, watching the sun set behind the old oak trees in the park, I reflect on the long, painful road that brought me here. There is still a phantom ache for the son I thought I had, for the love I thought was real. But it is a scar now, not an open wound. The bitterness has dissolved, washed away by the music and the laughter and the purpose I have found. The house, I now realize, was a gilded cage I built for myself, a cage of obligation and unrequited sacrifice. Mark was not the center of my life. He was the bars of that cage. My true legacy was never about a piece of property or a bank account. It wasn't what I gave to him in a moment of maternal blindness. It is what I built for myself and for others after I finally chose to see. In letting go of the son who abandoned me, I found a way to come home to myself, and in that, I found a peace more valuable than any inheritance.